In today's video, we're going to build a rudimentary but powerful system that allows us to add animations into our dialogue system and effectively creating a highly customizable cutscene system within our game. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own AARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Hey everybody! So one of the most hotly requested features for the action RPG tutorial here has been a cutscene system. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I really wanted to tackle that, at least not in this project, because I felt like this project was getting big. The tutorial series was getting long in the tooth. But I had an epiphany as I was working on my next series and kind of hit a wall and spinning my wheels. But I realized that we have a system already built into the Action RPG tutorial series that we could leverage to create cutscenes, and that's our dialogue system. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this dialogue system that we've already built, because it's kind of sequentially event-based, right? Right now it just does text and the portraits, but we're just going to add a new dynamic type of interaction to our dialogues that allows us to play back cutscenes. And we'll start with the most robust type of cutscene event we could play, and that is going to be an event that just plays back something from an animation player. Okay, we'll also make it so that these cutscene items can be played sequentially or in parallel if we need to do multiple at the same time, which for an animation is not necessarily needed, because obviously you can do all of that in an animation. But once we go and try and incorporate other things into this, like maybe you need to move some objects, but you can't use the animation player because, you know, they're dynamically placed or something like that. In those situations, you'll be able to choose how you combine or string these together. And so we're going to build a fairly robust while still basic system. So it'll allow you to kind of build these cutscenes, make things happen sequentially or in parallel. And it'll be easily extendable. So if you need to add new action or event types into your own system, you can do that. And we'll build all the basics that you need to make this a reality for your game. Now, you will need to grab just an updated version of one of the files to be able to run through this tutorial, and it's actually not super required, but if you want the updated icons, then hop on over to the itch.io page and you're going to find a file that we've downloaded in the past, and that's the zip file for the NPC and dialogue system. I've just added a few icons into the icon folder of that little pack of assets, so you can grab that, you'll have the new icons, or if you don't want them or want to reuse other ones, totally fine. You don't really need the icons to make the system work. If you are just coming into this fresh and you've never followed along with any of my tutorials for this series, then you can go back and look at how we built the dialogue system for our NPCs, and it's kind of an involved system. You are going to need it to be able to follow along exactly, although you may be able to use what I'm doing here in your own system and get kind of the same effect without having to go build my full dialogue system. But if you want to go back, the link to that playlist, which has a subset of videos in the Action RPG series, is linked in the description, so you can look there if that's what you want. Okay, so I've got this basic scene set up here, and you can see it's a really simple map. In fact, I need to rename this to 04. You can see I've called it the cutscene test. Okay, so you'll want a level to be able to use to test this in. You could use any other level. My level 02 that I typically build in is getting chock full of stuff, and I didn't really want to mess with that. So we're going to come over here to this nice, clean level with just minimal items in the scene tree. I've got a player spawn point so that I can choose where I spawn in this scene. I've got obviously the tile map with the little background. And I've got this NPC here, and he's got some dialogue interaction. Let's go ahead and just run this scene and see how that works. Now, of course, I just walk up to him, press interact, and he'll talk with me. So he says, "Hi, hero, is that you?" And I can just cycle through this. And right, because we've got this flow where it's step by step, we can build our cutscene into this, and that brings with it the advantage that once we add it, we'll be able to integrate dialogue and cutscene all in one. Because if we had built a separate dialogue system for this game, then we would have to figure out a way to like reverse engineer the dialogue into the cutscene system, because I imagine that's something you guys are going to want to do, right? So I think this is a good, I don't even want to say compromise. I think this is just a smart way to handle what we've already built for this game. Now, looking at this, we've got this dialogue interaction, scene, and node type, and it's got these dialogue text items. As a quick refresher, let's look at a few of these things. So a dialogue interaction is a node that is expected to contain dialog items. You can see here we've got our dialog items array, and once this node calls its ready function, you can see that it gathers all the dialog items, it adds them to that array. And of course, our dialog items can be of multiple types. We've got just our regular dialog text. We've also got like the choice dialog that we built, right, that allows the player to pick between some things. We'll look at this scene too, right? We've got I think this guy, yeah, he's got a dialog choice, right, where we've got the options where you can choose two things. And so what's really cool is even with this branching system, when we build these actions for this cutscene, they'll work with this branching dialog as well. So it's just going to be really easy to just integrate it. And essentially what we're going to be doing is building a new type of dialog interaction that does not display text, but instead it plays back some sequence, whether it's an animation or some other kind of, action or event that we want to happen. We'll just look at this real quick. Let's look at one of these dialog text items. Let's see, it extends dialog item. So all of our dialog items share this base resource, or this base class, I should say, okay, which just extends a node. But the dialog item has things like NPC information, so we know which, image to pull up and what the name of the NPC who's talking is. We've got these are things that are used to be able to edit it in the editor, and it's just got some basic functionality built in. Okay, so we can kind of leverage something similar to this. But I also want to look really quick at our dialog system, and so I'm going to find that here in my file system. So if I go to, is it in globals? No. It's going to be down here in GUI, I guess. Here we go. Dialog system. And I'm just going to open this scene, because then we'll have access to things. So in this dialog system, the root node dialog system has a script attached to it. And of course, we've made our dialog system in our project. Let's look at this too. This is an important part of our review. This is one of our global auto load things. So where is it? Dialog system right down here. So this node gets loaded as soon as our game starts running. And of course, any script has access to it. That's what makes it versatile and easy to use with our NPCs. Okay, and so that's another reason why I want to build off of it. But this dialog system just has some basic functionality. It shows dialogues. It has input event handling, so if we're pressing interact or attack or accept, it'll kind of try and progress through the dialogue. And it's got all the conditions built in to make that happen smoothly, to trigger the next piece of dialogue, to close the dialogue, and all of that stuff. So what we're going to be doing then is we're going to extend this just a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of functionality to our dialog system. We're going to create this new type of dialog item that we're going to call a cutscene action. And we're going to build all this in to make this function. Okay, I realize I've been doing a whole lot of talking so far in this video. So let's actually start building this. Now, the first piece that we're going to build is not something that I have even mentioned by name yet. It's going to be the root item that's going to drive these cutscenes. And we'll call this a dialog cutscene node. And this is going to extend our dialog items. Okay, so we had this dialog item. Now we'll just come down here to, in fact, I'm just going to right click this and say show in file system. There we go. So we can see we've got dialog choice, interaction, branch, text. These are all various types of dialog items and interactions. I'm going to go ahead and just take this. Actually, I'm just going to right click in scripts. I'm going to say create a new script. Okay, so this new script we'll call dialog_cutscene. And open that sucker up. There we go. So we're going to want to make this a tool script. I don't know that we really need to do this, but I don't want to break any existing functionality. And our system relies on the other things being a tool script, and so it might try and call stuff. This will just make it easy. And then in the future, any special type of cutscene action that you create that extends from this or inherits from this will be able to hook into this tool functionality if you need to. I'm also going to add an icon. And if we look at like our dialog item, we've done this here. We have like this icon reference. I'm going to just copy that and paste it. We don't have the icons yet. So real quick, I'm just going to drag those icons into this dialog folder, which we can see we've got the icons stored under dialog system icons chat bubble. So let's go ahead and find that real quick. GUI, dialog system icons. I'm going to go ahead and just open this in my file manager. And then I'm going to grab that file that you can access through itch.io. And I'm just going to grab these new cutscene icons right here. I'm just going to copy those, paste them into the folder. That way they'll import into our project. Okay, so then the icon that we actually want is called cutscene bubble. Did I spell that right? I should. And of course, another way to do that is you can kind of drag and drop this in here, right? And it would give you the full string, just like that. Okay. So we've got that set up. Let's give this a class name. That's going to be somewhat important. And the class name I'm going to use for this is just going to be dialog cutscene. And accidentally deleted the extends, but we don't want it to extend node. We want it to extends dialog item, okay? Because we want it to have that base functionality that a dialog item has. Just refreshing ourselves, right? This will make it easy to tie into our dialog system as well. If it didn't extend this, the code would be a little bit more involved to get it to work. Now this node, we're going to do more code than this initial setup, but for right now, we just want to build in the basic things that we know we need. And the most critical thing about this is we need a finished signal. And so both our dialog cutscene and our cutscene actions that we're going to build are all going to have a finished signal so that we know when they're done. So we'll just have a finished. And then I'm going to go ahead and make an enum type for this that I'm going to call mode. We want to be able to have two different modes, which I mentioned previously, and those modes are going to be sequential or parallel. I guess technically parallel comes first in alphabetical order, so let's do parallel. I'm trying to remember how to spell parallel. Two L's, I don't know, is that right? Parallel. And then sequential. And I like to make my enum values all caps. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and export a variable as well. And this variable is, we're going to call playback mode. And it's simply going to be a variable of type mode, this enum type that we just built. So I'm going to do colon mode, and then I'm going to set it by default to sequential because I think that's probably the most useful, but I don't know, maybe not. Okay, so there we go. Now we also need two other variables, and they're going to be pretty simple. We need to be able to keep track of all of our actions, and then when we do them in parallel, we need to wait for them all to finish, and they may not have the same duration. And so I want to be able to keep track of how many there are, or how many have completed their action, I guess, is really what I want to keep track of. So the first thing the first variable we'll define is our actions. And this is just an array. It's going to have a specific type later, but for now, I'm just going to instantiate it as an empty array. And I'll just say of node. And then we'll also have another variable that we'll call actions finished count, which is just an integer, and we'll set it to 0. Okay. So there we go. We've got that kind of set up. We are going to have a ready function or hook into that default built-in function, right? But for right now, we're just going to save this. We'll come back and we'll flesh this out a little bit later. Now, the next type of special class or node that we're going to need to be able to plug into our dialog cutscene, right? The thing that's going to be replacing this node here in this array is we need to make a new type. We're going to call these cutscene actions. And a cutscene action is just what it sounds. It's an action that will play out during a cutscene, either in parallel with or in sequence with the other actions that are children of the dialog cutscene node. So let's just go ahead and create that. I'm going to just show this in file system so I get there quickly. Create a new script. And this script we will call our cutscene action. I hope I spelled that right. We'll go ahead and give this a class name. And this one can extend node. It doesn't need to extend any other special functionality. All cutscene actions will have a finished signal, so we'll make a new signal called finished. And then all cutscene actions need to have one function in common, and that's just a play function. There we go. This class is just going to be the template that we're going to use for all of our other cutscene actions. So I'm just going to save that, and we're not actually going to do anything else with it. So I'll keep it open for reference, but we don't really need to mess with it anymore. I'm going to go back to my dialog cutscene, and I'm going to change my actions here from an array of nodes. Now that we've got this new custom class, we can make it an array of cutscene actions. So we'll say cutscene action, just like that. Okay. Save that change, and there we go. Now let's make the first type of cutscene action that we're going to build. And it's going to be the only cutscene action type that we build in this video, but it'll show you how these work. And so you can already get started making your own once you're done with this video if you want to. And you can wait. I'll do a couple small rudimentary other types of actions in an upcoming video. So if you want to wait for those because you need help, then you can do that as well. But let's go ahead just down here. I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this cutscene action. And the type of cutscene action that we want is an animation action, okay? So I'm going to just keep that name, cutscene _action, and then I'm just going to add an underscore and say _animation. Okay, so all of our cutscene actions will be named that way. This will make it so that they line up together here in the scripts folder. They're easy to find. And of course, I need to give this a new class name. And so this is just going to have animation at the end. And then it's not going to extend node because this is going to extend cutscene action. I do want to give this an icon. So I'm just going to come up here and say @icon. And I'm going to find that icon folder. And I've got this cutscene animation icon. I'm going to drag it in here. Go ahead and save that. What's my warning? Cyclic inheritance. Okay. I probably just need to remove this for now. We're going to use that play again. I'll keep the play. Okay. We don't need that finished signal. That's defined in the parent. So this class already has that signal there. You can't see it, right? But it's there. This action is really simple. What we're going to do is we're going to take this action and we're going to point it to an animation player and provide the string name of an animation. And what this node is going to do is when it gets called, it's just going to tell that animation player, hey, you need to play this animation. And then once it's finished, once that animation is finished, then this node will emit the finished signal up to the parent, and the parent will know that the animation is done and it can move on. Okay, so very straightforward. And so we just need to export two variables. We're going to export first a variable for our animation player, and we want this to be a node of type animation player. So we're going to type it that way. There we go. And then we're also going to export a string that we're going to call our animation name. So we're going to export variable animation animation name, and there we go. We don't need to initialize those with any particular value. And then we'll just build out the play function. So what does the play function do for this type of action node? And we'll just check. We want to make sure that we actually have assigned an animation player so we don't get any errors while we're playing, because you never know. You might break it on your own, right? So we're going to say, no, first we want to check if we have an animation player. So that line just says, is there a valid animation player? And then we will also check to see if we have an animation name. And then if we've got both of those in place, then we're ready to go ahead and play our animation. So we're going to grab our animation player. We're going to do a couple things. The first thing we need to do might not be obvious, but our cutscene, our dialogue system, I should say, actually pauses the game, which is fine, right? But then things like animation players don't play when they're paused, unless, of course, we set their process mode to always, which is what we'll do here. Or at least that's one way we can make them play. Oops. Okay, so we're going to say animation player dot process mode, and we're going to set that equal to process mode always. Okay, so that means it'll ignore the pause state of the game and it will be playable. And then once we've done that, we can go ahead and get our animation player, and we can call play. And of course, play on the animation player wants us to provide the string name of the animation that we want to play, and we can just pass in animation name. Then what we will do here is we're going to await this animation finished event, because animations all have an animation finished signal. Now, just a word to the wise, animations that are looping will never emit a finished event. Okay, so make sure that if you're building animations for this cutscene, you don't turn looping on, or you're going to have a looping cutscene that will never end, which I think is obvious and makes sense. So we're going to say await animation player dot animation finished, not changed. Where's finished? There we go. And then the final thing we need to do is we need to emit that we finished, but we're not going to do it indented in the if statement, because if these other conditions fail, we still want to say that we're finished. That way this thing doesn't break and hang. So we're just going to go 2 tabs back. So we're at the first level of our function here, which means it happens after all of this stuff. And we're just going to say finished dot emit like that. And that's it. That's all this thing needs to do. Okay. These cutscene pieces are going to be pretty straightforward. Now, you could build some pretty complicated and robust ones. In fact, if we want to do anything complicated by like moving our player, making him do actions, that one is just inherently going to be more difficult because it is, right? We've got a complex node that we're going to try and manipulate. But otherwise, this is going to be super powerful, super flexible, and allow you to do the majority of things you want to do for your cutscenes. Okay, now I say that this does stuff, but it doesn't do anything yet. And unfortunately, we're just going to have to keep coding to get it to do anything. But I do want to go in here, and let's just go back to our cutscene test scene. And what we're going to do is underneath our dialogue interaction, let's go ahead and add one of these new cutscene, what do we call it? Dialogue cutscenes, right? So I'm just going to do a Control A. And I'm going to type dialogue and look for dialogue cutscene. Boink. It's not showing the icon. I'm going to reload my project. That's going to force it to refresh and pick up those icons. So I'm going to go project, reload current project. So I'll see you in just a second. Okay, we're back. So now you can see our dialogue cutscene here has a little play icon on it. I'm going to drag it up after the first dialogue text, or you could even put it before. Let's go ahead and do it before. That way it'll, oops, doink. I'm having a hard time doing that. What's the move up and down? Control up. There we go. Okay, right before dialogue text 2. Okay, now underneath our dialogue cutscene, we need to add one of these animation dialogue things. So this is called the cutscene action. So I typed cust, but it worked. Cutscene action animation. We'll go ahead and grab that and say create. Now, we don't have an animation player in here. You're going to be tempted to add the animation player as a child of the NPC. And that might be okay. But just to keep it easy to find and so that I don't have to worry about positioning of the NPC affecting anything, I'm just going to add an animation player. Like so. And let's add an animation. Let's say that when we talk to this guy, we want the screen to fade to black. So I'm just make a new animation and I'll call it fade to black maybe. In order to animate that, let's go ahead and just add maybe like a global light. Or what am I looking for? Light. Let's see. Direction light. I don't know why. I'm thinking global light. That comes from a different software. Okay, directional light 2D. Go ahead and create that. And I'm just going to change this blend mode to subtract. And voila. And now by default, I'm going to set this so that the energy is 0 because we don't want it to be dark. And I'm going to come in here to my animation player. And I'm going to I'm going to select my direction light 2D. Make sure you've got that fade to black selected. I'm going to key that energy. And I do want it to create a reset track. And then we'll figure out how long we want this fade to be. And I'm going to turn on my snapping on my timeline and set this to 0.1. And I'm just going to say it should fade over half a second. And then I'll select this and reset that to 1 and key it again. There we go. So now we've got a little animation. Boom. Okay. Now we're going to be able to play this animation back. If we come up here to our NPC and we've got this cutscene animation, we can drag our animation player here and assign that. And then the animation name is fade to black. There we go. This is configured, but our dialogue cutscene isn't fully fleshed and it doesn't integrate into our dialogue system. So we need to do that now. Okay, in order to make this work, we got to finish the dialogue cutscene node first. So let's come in here and let's flesh out this script. So we just set up the basics, but now we need to make it all come together. Now, the thing that we obviously need to do when this is ready is find all of the actions that are child nodes and gather them and dump them into this actions array. Okay, so we'll do that here. And we'll make a function for this. So I'm just going to call gather actions. That way, if for some reason you need to call this elsewhere, you could. I'm going to go ahead and just copy that. And we'll make this function. And let's go ahead and just build it out. So we're going to do something we've done a lot in this series, and we're going to iterate through the children. We're going to check their type to make sure that they are a valid type that fits, meaning that they're, a class, either a cutscene action or a node that inherits or extends that class. And then if they are, we'll add them to the array. So we're going to say for C and get children. And then we're going to check if C, so for each of those child, if it is a cutscene action, right? Then we know we can add it to our array. So we're going to go actions.append C. There we go. Pretty simple. Now I'm just going to go ahead and come in here, and this is fine to do. This is a tool script. I got to mention that. This is a tool script, meaning it's going to run in the editor. So we're going to have to build in some code to make it not do everything in the editor. So I'm going to do a check right here before we do the next step. I'm going to say if engine.is editor hint equals false. So this means that if it's not an engine, or if it's not in the editor, meaning we're running the game, then we're going to do this next line of code. And we're going to go through each of our children, and we're going to connect to the finished signal. So we'll say connect. And we're going to need to make a new function for this. Obviously, it's going to be something like onActionFinished. And let's go ahead and create that function next. There we go. That's our gather actions. It's going to call it when we're ready. Pretty straightforward so far. Now, what we need to do in our onActionFinished function is also fairly straightforward, but it does depend on the type of dialog cutscene node this is, or the mode, I should say, the playback mode. So if it's parallel, we'll handle it one way. If it's sequential, we'll handle it another. And so let's go ahead and just build that in here. What we need to do is each time an action is finished, we need to check which type it is, do something in response. But before that, there's one other value up here that I want to bring to light, and that's this action finish count. Obviously, each time one of these is finished, we can increment this by 1, right? So let's go ahead and do that first. So we're going to say actions finished count plus equals 1. Okay, so this is going to keep adding up as these finish. And then let's do our check. So we'll say if, and actually I should explain this a little bit more first, because I said we're going to check which type of playback mode it is, but that's not exactly true. It's kind of true. First, we're going to check if we've finished all of the actions, because that's the most obvious thing that might happen, right? Like if the number of actions completed is the same as the number of actions in the array, then we know that we've completed everything. Then that means that this whole dialog cutscene is finished and we can emit this finished signal. So let's actually code that real quick. So we're going to say if actions finished count equals, or we could even say greater than or equal to, just in case somehow something fires twice, I don't know. If this is greater than or equal to the actions.size, then we're done. We can finish. So we'll say finished.emit. If not, we're going to do a check. Okay, so what we're going to check here is, in this case, if we're doing all of our actions in parallel, then we're just going to keep checking until we finally finish the last one. That's what that's going to do. But if we're doing these in sequence, we need to also queue the next action to play. So we're going to do a check here. So every time an action is finished, we'll check. Okay, are we done? Was that the last action? No? Okay, well, if not, is this a sequential type of playback? So we're going to say if playback mode equals mode.sequential, like that, then we're going to play the next action. And we've already incremented our actions finished count by 1. So what we can do is we can reuse that value, and we can just say actions at action finished count, right? So we're going to grab the action at this index, and then we just call the play function on that action. Pretty straightforward. So what that'll do is if there's 3, the first one finishes, the second one plays. When it finishes, it calls this again, then the third one will play, and then it'll call this again, and it'll finally hit this condition, and the dialogue, or this dialogue cutscene will be complete or finished. Okay, hope that makes sense. If not, it's probably my fault. Now, next what we're going to do is we really just need to build out one other function, because we already have the ability to gather our actions, so we've got them. We know how to kind of handle, check if they're finished, play the next one. We just never built a way for it to play the first action and start off this sequence or begin the parallel actions. So let's build that. We're going to make a function. I'm going to make it up here. I'm going to call this function play. Nice and easy. Now the play function does have to do specific things depending on if they're parallel or sequential. If it's sequential, we'll just play the first action, let the thing do its work. If they're parallel, we'll tell them all to play, and then we'll just wait for them to get finished as well. Other than that, we just need to do a couple things to tidy it up. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reset our actions finished count, because if you have a cutscene that plays every time you talk to a guy, let's say it can play multiple times, then this finished count will need to get reset back to 0 every time we play it. Okay, a lot of cutscenes are only going to play once, so that's not going to matter. And then let's just do a check to see if we're in the engine, because we don't really want to do the rest of this if we're not. Okay, so we're going to say if engine dot is editor hint, then we'll just return. Okay, if we're in the editor, just get out of here. Just don't do it. In fact, we could even place this at the first line of our play function, okay, before we reset the action finish count. Okay, so once this happens, we're going to do another check. We're going to say if, first thing we really should do is to make sure we have actions. So if our actions.size is 0, that means we don't have anything to play. What we're going to do is we're going to await a process frame, and then we'll emit that we're finished. So we're going to say await get tree. This just means it'll wait till the next frame. This is going to help avoid some potential bugginess. So next process frame, and then we'll just say finished dot emit, not emot. Worst typist in the tutorial world is probably me. Okay, so then next we've got an elif. Okay, we've checked it. We've got more than 0, I should say, actions. We've got at least one, right? Then we're going to go on to the next. We'll check, is the playback mode sequential? Is playback mode equal to mode.mo? Hey, Mo. Is it? Are you Mo? Hey, is this Mo? Sequential. And if it's sequential, then we're going to just play the first action. So we can say actions at index 0. Let me scroll down here so you can see this better. .play. Just like that. Just play the first one. And then because of the way this onActionFinished works, it'll just keep playing until we get done. Okay, but if it's not sequential, meaning if it's parallel, we can just do an else for this. Else, we're going to go through each action and we're going to play them back. So we're going to do a quick for loop. So we're going to say for A in actions. So for each action in our actions array, we're going to say a.play. Huh. And that rhymed. There we go. Okay, so if it's parallel, then as soon as this plays, we're going to kick them all off. Boom. Just like that. And this is the complete dialogue cutscene code. That's all we need it to do. You may need to extend it to do a few extra things if you want to, but I would advise trying to keep it as simple as we can, just like this, if at all possible. Okay, so let's look at our dialog system script and figure out what we need to do to get this integrated in. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is, well, let's open that script. How about dialog system? Go to the top. The first thing I want to do, we're just going to try and go down this mostly in order, but we've got this variable here when we're like text in progress or waiting for a choice. Let's make a new unique variable for when we're watching a cutscene. Okay, so this watching cutscene variable is just a Boolean. We'll set it to false. And then let's go ahead and just scroll down next to our unhandled input. So what we're doing in here is we're just obviously handling the button presses, and most of this is still good. But we're going to modify this first line. So here where we check if it's active, we're going to add a new condition in here. So we don't really want to handle the button presses if we're watching a cutscene. Now, you may want to change this and allow for skipping of cutscenes, but for this basic implementation, we're just going to leave that kind of disabled. Maybe not the best for user experience. You know, this is up to you, but for some games, it's critical, or that's the whole game. So we just add an or. So if we're watching cutscene, then we're just going to return. Okay. Now, if you want to, ignore this value, you could. You may run into some bugginess, and so you may need to just kind of handle things a little bit differently. But yeah, for the most part, that's all we need to do there. Next, we need to go to our show dialog function. So let's find the show dialog. So in this show dialog function, we just need to handle a few things. If we just look through this and look what it does currently, we have our hide and our start dialog, and really that's all fine. The only thing we really want to do in here is we want to just check if we're doing a dialogue cutscene or not. Because what happens when we play our cutscene system is right away we pop up this, portrait and the name and all that stuff. But during the actual cutscene portions, we're not going to show this. We'll only show this if it's dialogue. Okay, so going back to the script, right here at the beginning, we're going to do a check. So right after is active, we're going to just say if the items, see we pass in these items here, these dialogue items, we're going to check if the items are of type dialogue cutscene. So, or if the first one is, then we'll know, right? So if items, grab the first one, is dialogue cutscene. Okay, then we know to handle it like it's a dialogue cutscene. And so we're going to grab our dialogue UI and set the visible to false. Okay. Now, if it's not, then we'll set that same dialogue visible to true, just like we did here. Whoops. Okay, so that just comes up here underneath the else. And I think that's everything we need to do in here. If not, maybe we'll come back. Okay, so far so good. Now, next we've got these functions. We've got hide dialogue and we've got start dialogue. And we need to add a new thing in here because set dialogue text, set dialogue choice, right? These things are handling all of our specific cases. So right before set dialogue text, maybe I'm going to create a new function. And this is the function that we're going to use when we've initiated or started one of these dialogue cutscenes. So I'm going to say, we'll just call this one start dialogue cutscene because that makes sense. Start dialog cutscene. Cutscene is a really hard word for me to spell, apparently. Now, inside of this, just like we have here where we're passing in our dialog text, etc., I'm going to go ahead and copy that. We're going to be passing in something, but instead of a dialog text, this is going to be a dialog cutscene. Okay, and let's just look at where our set dialog text is even called to begin with. So like, let's find it. Whoop, whoop. Okay, so when we start dialog, we do these different things here. Okay, we set dialog text if it's that type. If it's dialog choice, we call set dialog choice, right? Otherwise, and in fact, we can go ahead and just code this right now. So let me go bump, bump, bump. Yeah, let's go ahead and add another condition here. We'll say elif. If our dialog item is dialog cutscene, then we're going to handle it by calling our start dialog cutscene function, and we can pass in our D as dialog cutscene, which this is kind of redundant. You could probably just pass in the underscore D and it'd be fine, but whatever. We'll just follow what we've done with these ones so that it's consistent. And there we go. That's all we really need to add to the start dialog. So let's save this. Go back to our start dialog cutscene. Okay, so that's how we arrive here at the dialog cutscene. And this is going to be fairly straightforward. It's a few lines of code, but they're all really simple things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our watching cutscene value, that Boolean, equal to true, so that we know we've started one. And then we'll just take our first, or we'll take this dialog cutscene and we'll call the play function on it. Okay, so that's going to begin. We're also going to make sure that we're not showing any of those UI items. Remember how we just did that, right? Was that in our show dialog? We just made it visible, true or false. But we may have just come off of the NPC talking or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to always set our choice options visibility to false. Make sure we're not showing any choices. And then also just the dialog UI altogether. Set that visible to false. Okay, because we don't want to show those. And then what we can do at this point is we just need D to play out. So we can put an await in here and just make this an asynchronous function. So we'll say await underscore D. I guess I want dot finished, right? Await that signal. And then down here, we can go ahead and re-enable our dialog. So we'll say dialog options. What is it? Choice options? I'm just getting these names mixed up. Sorry, guys. Let's just take these two lines. Copy, paste, and these should both be true now because we're going to re-enable the dialog. And we can set our watching cutscene to false now. Okay. And then what we just do is we need to advance the dialog right here. And so let's just go ahead and look at some of our unhandled input. This is where we're advancing the dialog. It's right here. Okay. And this is kind of funny because we do this naturally for both of these dialog types just here in the unhandled input. But we want it to automatically advance. Once this cutscene finishes playing, we're not going to wait for the player to push a button because they may not know if they need to or not. So let's just go ahead and split this out. I'm going to go ahead and cut this and we'll say advance dialog. Okay. And we'll just make that function right here. Func advance dialog. And then just paste that in here. And these need to be indented. Oops, not the first line. Okay, just like that. Okay, this way we can call this separately, right? I mean, that doesn't change how this works here. We're still doing the exact same code, but now it allows us to come down to our start dialog cutscene. And once this is finished, we can call that new function for advanced dialog, and it'll do the same thing without needing to do anything super fancy. And there we go. Now, let's go ahead and just try this out. So let's look at our scene, our 04 cutscene test scene. We've got a dialog cutscene in here that should fade to black, and then we should get dialog text. So if everything's working, that'll happen. If not, we'll get some sort of bug. Let's go ahead and just run it. And I'm going to come over here and talk to him. Faded to black. Hi, hero. Is that you? Heck yeah, it's me. Nice, bro. Happy to have a hero. Okay, and obviously it's still faded out. So maybe what we want to do is we want to come in here and set this dialog text to say like, you know, hey, who turned out the lights or something stupid like that, you know. Okay. And then maybe we'll have the hero say, "It wasn't me. It wasn't me." And then maybe we'll just duplicate this, and I'm going to move this down. So we can have another thing play, and then he'll say like, "Oh, nice. The lights are back." This is the stupidest example of a cutscene, right, guys? But just you understand what we're doing here. We're just testing this. And let's make a new animation that we can play. So we're just going to take this fade to black animation, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call it fade to normal. That's a pretty stupid name, but whatever. And I'm just going to reverse these. So just drag that out, drag that in, drag that there. Shoop. Okay, there we go. So now what'll happen is it'll fade out. Of course, this isn't going to play yet until I select this, and I got to change the name. Fade to normal. Let's go ahead and test the scene. Uh-oh. That didn't quite work. That didn't quite work. Okay, so I've got a little bug here, and unfortunately, I think this bug has existed ever since we built the dialogue system, and I'm not quite sure how to solve it. As you can see, I'm in different clothes. I spent some time last night trying to figure out how to solve this, and to no avail. So let me just point out what the issue is, and I'm going to extend an invitation to help out here. So these, I had moved these items around, but you can see that they're in a different order than what I saw. And sometimes when I'm moving these, you see how I drug this above dialog text 3, but it went below? If I switch scene and come back, you can now see that it is where I wanted it to be. So there's a bug here that's just kind of puzzling, and I'm not sure what's causing it, but I'm going to go ahead, and I think this is good now. Okay, so now we've got our dialogue cutscene. We've got our first dialogue. Hey, who turned out the lights? Hero saying it wasn't me. The lights come back on. Okay, let's go ahead and test it. And actually, real quick, before we test it, invitation. I will give Steam cash to somebody who can help me solve this bug at this point, because I'm kind of slammed this week. And I'd love to come to a resolution on this. And I think one thing I'm going to be doing is going back to previous revisions of the project and verifying if the bug existed prior to the work done on this cutscene, because I really don't think the cutscene introduced the bug. But anyways, with that said, feel free to help out. If you think you have an answer to what's causing it, drop a comment in the comments. I will say that if I were to do this dialogue system again, instead of doing this dialogue popping up like it does, I would probably build a custom plugin. I think that might help alleviate some of the issues that potentially are related to this bug, although I'm not sure at this point. You know, you live and you learn. But I guess this kind of thing was bound to happen at some point with such a long running series. Let's go ahead and just test out the final product and see how things work. So I should be able to talk to him, have it fade out, and whoops, push the dash button. Lights go out, and he's talking. Hey, who turned out the lights? It wasn't me. There we go, lights come back on. We finish our dialogue. But there we go, we've built this nice little system. It allows us to drop animations in and use them to perform cutscene type actions. You can obviously do things with an animation player like move objects. You can, you know, do just about anything. One of the limitations is that I mentioned during this video is it's going to be hard to move the player because we're not going to get the animations and the interaction we want with that. Unfortunately, moving the player is probably the most difficult one. And in fact, I would go so far as to say if we're going to move the player and want him to animate and everything, we're probably going to need to make a special copy of our player that doesn't accept inputs, and so we can unpause it and not have it, you know, be influenced by its state machine and kind of handle it that way. But that's something that we can definitely do. Likewise, NPCs, they're a little bit easier. We can probably unpause them and move them around as we see fit. And then you can do just about anything you want. Queue things in sequence, which we didn't really do sequence or parallel, but we'll do that when I add another cutscene action type in the next video so that we can see why we built that parallel and that sequence. And you'll be able to see how the system can come together. And otherwise, I hope that this is helpful for you guys in your projects. Thank you for following along. Go ahead and drop a subscribe if you're new and you want to see what's coming next. And as always, we'll see you next time.